I want to open with a prayer. So, dear Lord, awaken us an awareness that the same hands we lift to you in prayer are the hands that fill out our voting ballot. That the same eyes that read your word are the eyes that read the names of candidates and propositions. May the way we vote show us to be citizens of your kingdom, people of hope in the midst of despair, joy in the midst of sorrow, faith in the midst of fear, truth in the midst of confusion, generosity in the face of need. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord and for the sake of his love. Amen.
Amen.
So we're going to be talking about voting your values. And but we want to know, what does that mean? Presiding Bishop Michael Curry says, cast your vote, not in a partisan basis, not based on your biases, but vote your values. Vote the values of human dignity and equality. Vote the values of the rock on which this country was built. So, what does that mean? What are our values? Now, obviously, your values are personal, but we want to try to explore them and stretch them a little bit. And today we're going to be reflecting on the values of the church. The church expresses its values through democratically approved resolutions. Thousands, I'm sure it's thousands, of resolutions have been approved by the Episcopal Church and also by the Episcopal Diocese of San Diego. Now, here's a very tiny sampling of some of the topics and some of the resolutions. And we'd like to explore that. Does everybody have a handout? Can we make sure that everyone has a handout, please? So if you don't have a handout, just let them know, because we need that to do what we're doing next. Because we have a little bit of exercise. So what I want you to do is to find either 2 or 3 people to partner with. And looking at this list of topics, agree on one to explore. On these handouts, you have the QR code to link to these documents. And if there's any challenges or issues, we can help with them. So you're going to be dividing into groups of 2 or 3. You're going to agree on a topic to explore. You're going to find the resolution online. And some of these resolutions are a little long and wordy, I need to warn you, but focus mainly on the title and the initial maybe couple paragraphs, because that's where they usually say, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. And then after that, it goes into perhaps more details about implementation and what they're trying to do. So with your little small group of 2 or 3 people, please discuss what position does this resolution take on the issue that you want to explore? What is the spiritual basis? And if it's not obvious, discuss what it should be or could be. And then, knowing this resolution, are there any conversations or actions you can engage in the next couple weeks to share these values? And afterwards, we're going to have just a short debriefing from you. Okay, so let's hear from you. Does anyone want to share their...
Rex and I discussed
reproductive rights that's listed here, and we read what was written up by the church, the general church. Our feeling was that people that say they are pro-life are not truly looking at the whole situation of a mother's life being in danger too. They are only looking at abortion, and what I think they focus on is that abortion is being used as birth control, and they're not looking truly at all the issues that are concerned with reproductive life, and when a mother's life can be in danger, or she could be in a situation where she would not be able to have other children if she wasn't treated properly.
That's great. So that's something you could be sharing in conversations over the next couple of weeks.
Yes.
What was the spiritual basis that you found?
Well, we really didn't look at that, but I think that what we would, if I may speak for both of us, is that we are thinking of God creating people and taking care of all God's people.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to share? Barbara.
Well, if I can just add a comment to that, I was recently at an international meeting in Barcelona, and they had come to, abortion and reproductive rights around the globe. And Saudi Arabia is more progressive than we are now. And one of the comments, again, was, this is really a search for power, people using religion as a means to gain power, and it's really a disrespect for women. I mean, it's not giving them autonomy in decision making. I just wanted to add to your comments.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anyone else want to talk about a resolution?
Well, we did also, so we also did gun violence.
Okay, great.
And we thought that this is just a long-standing problem, but it's people, again, looking for power, and they'd be better off. The spiritual issue is if they could recognize that they're beloved children of God and be empowered through that spiritual dimension, and that it's just really not respecting the dignity of other people, or the life, or thou shalt not kill, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to share? Okay.
I'm wondering why it requires each congregation to declare itself a gun-free zone as opposed to making it a diocesan policy.
I think it because all the congregations aren't necessarily willing to do that. So I think we want to support autonomy with that, from that perspective. So you can't, the challenge, let me tell you from my executive council perspective, you can't do things top down in this diocese, trust me.
Okay, thank you, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Anyone else want to talk about the resolution they looked at?
We worked on two different resolutions, but the same topic, which is racial discrimination, and the one concentrated on expanding the categories that are recognized in law for discrimination. And also talked about how the conduct is perceived, because that is where the harm really occurs. It's not always physical violence, it's a kind of emotional abuse. And the other one I have to think about for a second. Neil, do you remember the second resolution, oh yes, was about Asian Pacific Islander discrimination against those groups. And here's Neil.
Most discriminations come from minorities and groups that the church is just starting to explore. And when they do have the conferences, sometimes it's not brought up because it's more leaning to the white perspective than the minorities perspective. But here in California, where we have such a diverse culture, that I think the church needs to be more involved in trying to reach out to the different programs that can help benefit minority, immigration, and I think that's the biggest role that I see, talk to some of my political friends, that this election is very important, so we go forward instead of back.
Absolutely, thank you. That resolution was from the Episcopal Diocese of San Diego. It was passed during the pandemic, and as you remember, there was a lot of anti-Asian feeling at that point. So the resolution really calls for us to call out those kinds of actions that you just talked about, about Asian Pacific, but anybody who is in these kind of situations. So yes, it does call for action on our part. So. Anybody else? Yep.
Okay, let me add. So Neil said that here, you recently talked to the mayor about here.
I attended an event last night, and I knew Todd for over 20 years, and so I did holiday it briefly because there was such a large event yesterday. That he sees the diverse issues are not being met here in the city, which he's trying to, and you see a lot of negative ads on his challenger. They don't realize how homelessness and other things are that he's trying to do, but you just can't do everything for 4 years. And a lot of politicians get blamed on this every time the election comes up. That, oh, well, he didn't do that, he didn't do that. And it's not just one man. It's a consensus of the city council, it's a consensus of the neighborhoods, and these are issues that are not being met. And this is his biggest challenge, trying to unite everybody. And so, I sort of lean more to one side of the issue than the other, because like I said, at least he's trying to give it benefit of the doubt. So on this level, I think everybody needs to talk to friends and neighbors. Don't be political in this setting, but it's very important that we move forward.
Great. And I'm gonna help address some of that in just a second. Any last comments? Because I'm gonna move on otherwise. Okay. So we want to, as you just said, talk more about how we can act out on our values, particularly in this election season. The number one priority, in my opinion, needs to be prayers for the election season. On October 1st, Bishop Susan, as part of this election participation initiative, led a 30-minute prayers for the election, and it was amazing. It was a really moving liturgy, and I know that the diocesan staff is looking at probably offering it through their website, so people can join in and download, watch it, and whenever they want to. But I certainly want to see it again. But as I said, I think prayers are one of the most important things we can do between now and the election and following the election. And so wanted to share this initiative. It's by Sojourners, and it's a shared call for prayer with congregations across the country and spanning denominations and faith traditions, will unite in a commitment for prayer both the weekends before and after the election. And what I think is really neat, it's inspired by the faith community that came together in concerted prayer in the lead up to the historic 1994 election in South Africa. And there's a link to a website on this, a Sojourners website, and that includes prayer materials, including a litany for the 2024 election that was adapted by from a litany of an Episcopal youth missioner. So I just wanted, that's kind of one of the things that we can be doing in terms of actions. As was just mentioned, we want to be able to have civil conversations and educate people. And one topic can be what you were just talking about, having, evaluating objectively the candidates and the propositions and ballots that are before us. And the League of Women Voters has amazing materials, and I know you're going to have on the 30th a session of pros and cons about the propositions, predominantly the state, I assume, but maybe, and also the local propositions. And so it's a nonpartisan objective. But what in the materials, they have some guidance in terms of evaluating propositions, and which I found very valuable. And I just took 4 of them because there's a lot more, but this is for as many as I can fit on a PowerPoint slide. But it talks about measuring what the measure wants to really accomplish, and do you agree with it? And who are the real sponsors and opponents? Because we all know these ads are not real clear on that lots of times. Check where the money is coming from. And does the measure address how it's going to be funded? Because we don't want to vote in something that we have no idea how it's going to get funded, and it may be drawing from things that we don't want to be drawn from. And then, of course, beware of distortion tactics and commercials that rely on image but tell nothing about the substance of the measure. And beware of half-truths. One of the things that we're seeing with the Proposition 33 ads that I noticed is that the spokesperson says she's a single mother renter. And yet, at the end, all ads talk about who are the major funders. The major funder is the California Apartment Association. So it's not a renter, it's a renter that actually is sponsoring this ad. So those are the kinds of things that, obviously it's up to you to decide, but those are the things that we, to use our brains, to use our analysis to evaluate these kinds of things, I think are really important with this election. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. And obviously, one of the most important things is getting out the vote. Bishop Curry says it's a Christian obligation to vote. More than that, it's the church's responsibility to help get souls to the poll. After Taylor Swift's endorsement, there was a wave of voter registration that happened, which is good because studies show that the closer to the election people register, the more likely they are to vote, which I thought was interesting. And voters, especially young voters, are more likely to vote if encouraged by family and friends. So go out and encourage as many people as possible, please. I just want to make sure you know about the sdvote.com site, because that is by the Registrar of Voters of San Diego. And it's an amazing site because it basically can do everything for you. You can go on there and check if you're registered. If you're not registered, you can register there. It will let you know, you can change your party on that or change your address. You can find a polling place or a place to drop off your mail ballots. And then later on, once you have your ballot mailed or submitted or done, it will let you know that they've actually received it at the Register of Voters. So it's really a valuable site to encourage you. So before I go on, is there any questions or comments that anyone wants to make? Because I have a really fun finale, but I'm going to hold off until you're done with your comments and questions. Anyone? Yeah.
This may be partly off topic, but I've always wondered, if I vote for a proposition, it passes, maybe it's a bond issue, it's going to renovate the schools, for example. How do I know that the money is actually going to go for what the ballot title says it's going for?
Yeah, that's a great question, and sometimes, hopefully, if they've done the proposition writing well, it will include things like checking on that or limiting the use of the funds. But also the legislature is responsible ultimately for making sure that money happens and gets spent and it's done. So it's, your elected officials is who you always, in my opinion, hold accountable for these things like that.
I follow up. So in a way, if the proposition passes, then that becomes kind of an agreement or a contract between the people and the government. But how is that agreement enforceable?
Well, lawsuits. Well, how else do we do things in this country? To be honest, that's it. A proposition is, and California, in my opinion, overdoes it a little bit, but not all states have the ability to do citizen propositions. And they have the force of legislation when we vote them in. So they are in fact become laws. They don't, in this year's election, we don't have any constitutional amendments that are citizen propositions. We have in the past. We can even change the Constitution through these elections. So that's what they are. So they're actually become laws in California. And they, if they're not being enforced, we can, sue or, do other things like agitate against the politician that isn't making it happen.
One other thing that you just reminded me of, I went to a talk once by Justice Moreno, now retired from the California Supreme Court, and he said that propositions often cause the Supreme Court a great deal of difficulty because the proposition has not gone through the legislative process. It hasn't been debated. It hasn't had a lot of reports compiled and presented. And therefore, the Supreme Court has a situation that wasn't contemplated by the proposition, but they have the obligation to decide on what it's kind of a fiction. There's the will of the people, but how do we apply it? And that's why I'm very skeptical, and I frequently avoid signing the petitions to put a proposition on the ballot. And I've had the experience also that if I ask the signature solicitor to see the text, I get some pushback. And I can't possibly read all of that text while I'm standing there with the frozen goods melting.
I can totally relate. Diane?
Oh, that's why when,
For the recording.
sorry. That's why when Simpler Living puts out a petition, we're there for weeks at a time. So you have a chance to read, you have a chance to think, and then you can sign.
Thanks, Diane. Okay, anyone else have any comments? Thank you.